Okay guys, in this video we're going to talk about the second part of building a business card. As you can see, I've got my business card all created. I'm going to go ahead and show you how we did this. So a lot of times when people are asking you to build a business card, they'll give you some information and you need to um, create it. But I'm going to go back to, so I'm going to detach this window just by clicking on the tab and dragging down, and I'm going to minimize it for now. There are a few things in here that we'll have to take a look at, and most of those things are just font styles and things like that. But I'm going to go ahead and show you how to make this business card. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to just take this window and I'm going to make it a little bit smaller just so that we can keep some colors. And if you're doing it yourself, or you know the colors that you want to use. But here's that document that we went into new, and in new went to the preset, just like we did it from the video before. So what I need to do now is I like to work by using and putting the background in. So as you can see, there's a gradient in the background. So I'm going to click on my color palette and the color picker, and I'm going to try to find a dark brown. And obviously if you have a color that you know that they already want, for example, I know that this color is the color that they wanted, maybe they sent a sample or something like that. Maybe we'll just, so what I'm going to do now is I'm just hiding my screen. I'm going to grab the logo and I'm going to drag it over Photoshop, and it opened up the logo. I'm going to take my eyedrop tool and I'm going to click, and that copied that color. And then I'm going to click on my move tool. If I keep it on the eyedrop tool and I click eyedrop and then I click over here, if I don't actually hit the button, if I'm not really careful, it will change the color. So I need to make sure that you hit the button so that way it knows, okay, not to select that color. So here's my canvas. I'm going to go ahead and now I just hit these little black arrows, and that's going to swap what's in the foreground and what's in the background here just on the color tool, the palette. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to highlight that same brown, but then I'm going to drag it down so it's a little darker. And now I have a dark and a light, and I'm going to go back to dark and light. Now there's a couple different ways that you can make a gradient. One, you can create a new layer by clicking and dragging a new layer, and then you can click on the gradient tool, and from here you can select different styles of gradient. So right now with this gradient tool, if I drag and drop, I get a dark to light. If I drag and drag up, then I get light to dark. And that's like what this one is. Obviously the color doesn't match because I'm not using that same color. So what I'm going to do, just to save time, is I'm going to take my eyedrop tool and I'm going to copy that color, switch, and I'm going to copy that color. And then I'm going to hit there. Now I'm back on my main one, and I'm going to click and drag, and it's going the wrong way, so I'll click again and drag. And it's kind of one of those things that you just have to test to get where you want. And that's good. So that's one way of doing a gradient. Another way of doing a gradient is having a new layer, taking your marquee tool, your box tool, and I just on this I just drag a shape, so a rectangle shape. So I have my rectangle shape right there. I'm going to click on the fill, and as you can see, I have it right there. So that is another way to do it, but as you can see, it's backwards. So this fill isn't working the way that I want it to go. I need it to reverse. So you can go in and adjust so that it goes the other way. And if you're wanting it to move down a little bit, you can scale. So as you can see, you can scale it. You want to be exactly on if you want those to be right. And so there you go, you can see, you can scale it. You can also, oops, I'll undo that. Let me delete that. Also, while on that, you can click down on this box and you can adjust the opacity for like how transparent you want it to be. It also will let you do different types of gradients, like a radial gradient. So this one is in a circle, and if you want to make the circle bigger, or if you want to reverse it in and out. So there's some really cool effects that you can do using gradients. So that's another way to use a gradient. There's yet one other way to do a gradient, by doing a new layer. And this is actually my preferred way of doing it, is clicking the effects button down at the bottom and going to gradient overlay, and it brings up a gradient overlay palette. And from this gradient overlay, I'm going to click on the gradient and click the colors, and here I can slide these to go up and down where I want them. The other thing that it does, which is nice, is I can reverse it so that it's going top to bottom. So I'm going to go ahead and put that in there. Now, one thing that it doesn't look like it's working is, I believe that it has to have a color. Now, see, I just put in, I can put any color in there, it doesn't matter, it could be red. And so you see the background, or this color, if I take the effect off, it's red. But if I have the gradient overlay, and if I double click on that right there, it shows that gradient overlay, and I can scale it up or down. The other thing that's really nice, and why I like this one the best, is because if I want, I can click and drag, and I can move this gradient a lot more easily than any other of the effects, and to have it more precise. So that's how I use it, is I do it with an effect, using the effects. And there's also up here, you can do it up here. So now that I have my graphic here, I need to bring in, I like to do, the next thing would be to bring in the picture. So I have a picture right here. There's a couple ways to open it. You can obviously file and open and find that picture, and now it opens that picture. It's got a white background, so I'm going to double click on that white background, use my magic wand tool, give it a pretty good tolerance, and hit delete. That's going to clean out the background. Now it's really rigidy. If depending on, you know, what you're trying to do, it might make more sense to try to soften some of these ridges so that they're not so it doesn't look so cut out. And what I'm doing is just taking the eraser tool and I'm adjusting the hardness so that it isn't quite so sharp. And if you mess up, you can always go back in and delete. But there you go. So that looks a little bit better. There's another little pixel right there that's kind of messed, and a pretty sharp angle right there. So now that looks a little bit better for what we're doing. So I'm going to do a Command A, or to select all. Again, there's a lot of different ways to do this. I always just put it onto the clipboard by Command A and then cutting it out. But there's also moving the layer, and if I am on my move tool, I can drag it right over to here, and now I have her right on this area. And I can see a little teeny bit of white or something that's outlining her. Now I could go around with my polygon lasso tool or my erase tool, but the easiest thing to do is to click on the layer and then hold down Command and click, and it auto selects. And then I'm going to go up to Select and Modify, and contract. That contracts, and then I can tell it by how many pixels I want it to contract. I'm going to say 1 pixel, and it'll bring it in, and then I'm going to inverse this selection. So if I go to selection, inverse, or shift command I, now it's, instead of when I hit delete, because if I don't inverse it and if I hit delete, it deletes her. I don't want to do that. So I want to do shift command I, inverse, and delete it. And now you can see there's not that white glow or that stroke that was around her. So that looks much, much better. In the next video, we'll go on to adding type, adding text, but already just with a background change and a picture change, which are essentially 2 layers, we're already starting to make it look like a pretty decent business card.